Welcome into our nation's capital. It's Inauguration Day +1 now here in Washington, D.C. I'm Jill Savage, of course, alongside me, Matthew Peterson and Chris Bedford. And when we're steps away from the Capitol building, we get some special guests to join us. And that today is Senator Jim Banks. So thanks so much for joining us. First of all, Jim, I really want to just ask you, what are some of the changes that you've seen in this city over the last couple of days?
Well, it's such a night and day difference. Yesterday was a great day, one of the greatest days in American history. And to be in the rotunda, to be a part of that, such a surreal moment, steps away from President Trump, a great speech. And then he left there and immediately began to do what he told us he was going to do. Well over 100 executive orders that immediately took effect, from reinstituting the effective Trump border policies to one of my favorites, requiring new federal buildings that are built around the country to use classical architecture, which fits right into this great idea that America is great and we should forecast that to the rest of the world in our buildings, to executive orders on getting rid of the electric vehicle mandates to save American automobile jobs. By the way, I'm a son of a factory worker who made axles all of his life, so those American-made jobs are important to the people where I come from. He's off to a great start. The pardons for the Jan 6 protesters, many of them were locked away for 2 years and never even charged with anything. And he followed through on those commitments that he made to the American people that gave him that big election win on Election Day, and he followed through on it. But this is not even 24 hours.
Yes.
I mean, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot more to come. I've been calling this is the shock and awe moment. The first 100 days are going to be full of big wins by President Trump through executive order. And if Congress gets its act together and follows through on what we're supposed to do, we can cement all of these big wins for a long time to come.
Can we just zoom in real quick on the January 6 pardons, because I feel like this is really important for reasons that I've heard people from Jason Whitlock, who's not a political guy at all. He just voted for the first time this year for Donald Trump, to many people who are more seasoned veterans of the political world. There's something about that goes to the heart of a false narrative that's been dominating the media for the last 4 years, plus a matter of justice that I feel like is really important. And I know you've been brave on this issue for a while. Can you say more what you think about this?
Well, remember, I was supposed to be the Republican ranking member of the sham Jan 6 committee, and Nancy Pelosi blocked me and Jim Jordan, and it all turned into the Liz Cheney crying Adam Kinzinger show on the so-called Republicans that they let be on the committee. But the reason that Jim Jordan and I were blocked from being on that committee is because we wanted to tell the truth. We wanted to show the American people what really happened that day, and that a lot of these people were wrongly locked up behind bars and mistreated. And to your point, now when President Trump signed that pardon yesterday, they were immediately letting these people go free from jail, and they're going to go home and they're going to tell their real story. They're going to talk about what happened to them. January 6th was over 4 years ago, and many of these people were locked away for years, never charged. Some of them were, one of the first people charged after January 6th, convicted, was a grandma from Indiana. And, these people were wrongly accused. They were locked up for it. I just got chased down the hallway by an NBC reporter, a CBS reporter, I can't tell the difference. And he was asking me, put the microphone in my face, and can you respond to President Trump pardoning the January 6 people? And it made me angry, because why aren't they talking about Joe Biden pardoning his family, the most corrupt family ever to live in the White House? Joe Biden, on his way out the door, pardoned a guy who killed 2 FBI agents. Yeah. They're not, the media isn't even talking about that. They want to continue to demagogue these people who were there on January 6th to support President Trump and support our country. Many of them got swept up into something that they weren't a part of, and they were wrongly locked up for it. And the big difference between the two is Joe Biden told us that he wouldn't pardon his family. Donald Trump, on the campaign trail for 2 years, told us when he was running for president, I will pardon the January 6 protesters who have been wrongly locked up. And he followed through on that yesterday. And I think that's a very important moment for him.
You've been a vocal proponent of beauty and class civic architecture for years now. And what's interesting about this Make America Beautiful Again Act that the president brought back is it never got any time to really breathe when he first gave it. It was at the end of the administration, quickly repealed by the Joe Biden. But now it seems like there's a couple of different secretaries that are talking about it. You hear potential Secretary of Transportation talking about the importance of that in infrastructure. But over the last 4 years, the Department of Defense has led a lot of different purges of history and architecture, whether it's at West Point or whether it's the Reconciliation Memorial in Arlington Cemetery. Did that come up with in your conversations with Pete Hegseth about what he would do in defense?
Yeah, he's a big believer in all of this. We've talked about it. I mean, projecting American strength and the greatness of America should be projected in our buildings and in our infrastructure. So Pete and I have had many conversations, but he fully believes that too. It's projecting to the rest of the world that we're great, and that's what we should be doing. And President Trump signed the executive order late in his first term, and Biden immediately stripped it away. I introduced the first bill in Congress that would cement that executive order. Now we're going to do the same thing in the coming days to cement this new executive order to make it the law of the land, so that the next president, God forbid, if that was ever a Democrat that would come back to the White House that would do away with it, would succumb to the pressures of special interest groups who profit from the ugly buildings that get built around the country that last for 30 or 40 years instead of for hundreds of years.
And they're redone all the time.
Yeah,
Is there any talk about restoring some of the things that have been taken away, like the memorial in Arlington Cemetery or other things that Department
I think
of
that's
Defense
very
has
much on
shuttered away?
President Trump's mind, and I know that he cares about that. He's going to engage on that subject, and I think it's a really interesting subject, something that our community should be talking more about, how we support
Absolutely.
Public policy measures like that.
I love that that's one of the priorities right now because it is something that is important. But we see Donald Trump and we see the mandate that comes along with this. This big election comes with this big victory and a lot of promises. So what is the Senate going to prioritize now in the first 100 days?
Well, we just passed the Laken Riley Act, which says that if you're here illegally and you've committed a violent crime or committed a theft, there were amendments added to the bill later on that if you've assaulted a law enforcement officer, then you are locked up, not let go. I mean, really, it's an absurd notion to think about that we would allow violent criminals come into our country over a wide open border. We know who they are, we know where they are, and under Joe Biden and the Democrats, they were just set free. And the Laken Riley Act says that that's not going to happen anymore. So we passed it out of the Senate. I expect the House to quickly pass it too. And I expect it'll be the first bill from Congress that goes to President Trump's desk that he will sign into law.
One of the breaks you still see amongst Republicans in the Senate versus Republicans and maybe in the White House is you've got a more neoconservative attitude in the Senate. I know that this is going to come before Senate Intelligence Committee, but can you give us any kind of insider knowledge on Republican feelings toward Tulsi Gabbard, who has questioned a lot of those pieties in a way that you haven't seen from some of the other nominees?
Yeah, I had a great meeting with Tulsi Gabbard. I served with her in the House, and she came to my office to talk about her nomination. And by the way, I spent 8 years in the House. I'm 2 weeks on the job in the Senate. People say, what's the big difference? The big difference is the nomination process. So the nominees come to my office, and you immediately, I mean, the nature of that means that senators have more influence because you influence the nominees, and you don't just ask them tough questions, but you ask them to make commitments. And I didn't have to ask Tulsi that because Tulsi is very focused on making the intelligence community more transparent and then holding people accountable for the bad things that they've done, like the intelligence community that pushed the false narrative about Hunter Biden and the laptop, and they all 50-something of them that have security clearance that President Trump is taking away from them. By the way, this is another great
Hate to see
moment.
it.
But when Tulsi's the head of the intelligence community, she's going to hold these people accountable, but she's also going to make important things transparent that have been hidden from the American people. And I'm talking about everything from the JFK files to what happened on January 6th to a lot of other important things that have happened in recent years. And that's what she and I talked about. So she goes before the Intelligence Committee, and you're asking a good question because I feel pretty good about all of these nominations, from Pete Hegseth to We just had I'm on the Veterans Committee. We just heard from Doug Collins. He's gonna skate through. Marco Rubio's the first nominee that was passed last night on day one, 99-0. So there are a lot of great nominees I think are going to be move forward very quickly. But Tulsi, I think, is the one that might be the biggest challenge. But it's really important that we all support her.
Can you talk a little bit about the Senate beyond the nominations in general? Right now, I think you see increasingly a base, or it's more than just a Republican base. Really, it's the entire MAGA coalition, right? Who isn't happy, as Chris is alluding to, with leadership in the Senate. And this has been ongoing. It's sort of come to a head a few times. And when I look at this, I see something that people in Washington would say was, it'd be almost impossible a few years ago that you'd ever change this. But there's certainly a move, a move in a different direction. A lot of people who want to move in that direction, who are your colleagues. So how do you think about the scene?
I'm optimistic. I mean, I got here 8 years ago when President Trump was elected the first time, and Paul Ryan was the Speaker of the House. And even before President Trump was inaugurated in January of 2017, Paul Ryan was talking about being the guardrails to protect our democracy from incoming President Trump. So, and today you have Mike Johnson, he's not Paul Ryan. He's very pro-Trump. You have John Thune, the new Senate leader who replaced Mitch McConnell, who had a similar mindset about Trump back then and all the way along as what Paul Ryan did. But it's not just about leadership, and I think this is important. We often talk about leadership and we complain about them, but it's the rank and file membership of the House and the Senate Republican caucuses that are very different than they were 8 years ago. And the biggest reason why is because Donald Trump got involved over 8 years. He got involved in my primary and cleared the field in Indiana, and I'm a senator today because of it. But he got involved in primaries for all the way up and down the House races, Senate races. He took on incumbents, and he forced a lot of old school Republicans to retire early. And a lot of them did that over the last 8 years. So you look at the Eric Schmitz and the from Missouri and Bernie Moreno in Ohio, a lot of great new conservative, new right members in the Senate, and you don't have the Pat Toomeys and the Mitt Romneys. They're not in the Senate anymore, so it's very different. And this gives me a lot of optimism about what we can do. The thing that we have to do is pass the reconciliation bill, and what that does is it's a legislative maneuver to get us out from under the 60-vote rule to pass something with 50 votes with a tie-breaking vote from the VP that would make a lot of the Trump policies permanent, from securing the border to making the tax cuts on working class families and small businesses permanent. This was a big mistake that Paul Ryan and Republicans made. I was there for it in 2017, the focusing more on the corporate tax rates and making them permanent, but not the individual rates on working families. So now we have an opportunity with reconciliation to fix that and make those tax cuts permanent on the people who matter most, and that's what we're going to do.
There's so much difference that you can see publicly and openly on the television between the first inauguration of Trump and the second one that we just went through. But you had an insider seat to both. So what was a big difference that you noticed last night from 8 years ago?
Well, if you remember 8 years ago, we all had raincoats. Remember there was the meme of Bernie Sanders with
It's wonderful.
The gloves.
with the gloves, and George W. Bush, 8 years. He became a meme in both of them because of the I think he had an umbrella in the first one, and yesterday he was enjoying himself. But the location obviously historic to do it in the Rotunda. Last time it happened was Reagan in '85. But I just sensed that with Joe and Jill Biden and Kamala up in the front row, and they knew what they did. They knew what they got away with. He had just left the White House, where he signed pardons for his family members, for other corrupt people, and for the audacity for them to get up and stand on that stage. But the best part about it was President Trump didn't hold back. He talked about how bad the last 4 years have done, the damage they've done to this country, and how he's going to make America great again. And I thought I've heard him give great speeches, the Mount Rushmore speech and other speeches that he gave in the first term. This was the greatest speech I've heard him give. And the whole everyone there, even that I sat next to a couple of Democrat senators, they feel it too. They know that they know their party has been broken. The resistance has been broken. From the big tech execs who were on the stage to the media outlets to Democrats in the Congress, they know that they are on the losing side, the wrong side of history. The voters spoke loud and clear, and President Trump represents a movement that doesn't end with President Trump in 4 years. It's a movement that's going to be around for a long time to come.
Yeah, we're big football fans over here. So it's like we won the first day. We're still winning the second day, and we're not tired of winning yet.
at all.
Senator Jim Banks, thanks so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Don't go anywhere because our next guest will tell us who Donald Trump fired yesterday and why. And this portion of the show is brought to you by Good Ranchers. Go ahead and visit goodranchers.com because one of the mandates now for Make America Healthy Again, we want to go through and make sure that there are no seed oils in our food. And Good Ranchers never puts any of that in there. So go ahead and visit goodranchers.com. Use the promo code Jill to get free shipping, $25 off your express shipping, and get your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. It's goodranchers.com. Use code Jill to claim your $25 off and free meat in your box. Good for a year. Yesterday, in the midst of all the executive orders, Donald Trump quietly fired 4 officials. They were the Executive Office of Immigration Review, and they were all from the Department of Justice. So joining us now to help break it all down is Mike Howell. He's the Executive Director of the Heritage Oversight Project. All right, so you're fired, right? It's a big thing. Donald Trump likes to do this. What was special and unique about this one?
So the Immigration Court, which is out of DOJ, a lot of people don't realize this. It's like an internal government court system at DOJ, which oversees all the deportation and removal cases. So Trump just went in and cleared the decks at the highest levels of it. Now, there's going to be a lot more coming down the pike, I'm sure, because what the Biden administration did, first, they fired a bunch of the immigration judges. We call them judges, but they're really just like administrators. They're fake judges. But Biden had fired all of Trump's appointees that were still in their probationary period and then stacked the decks with people from like liberal immigration nonprofits. And so by Trump coming in, replacing the top leadership, that indicates this is a high priority to remake EOR, Executive Office of Immigration Review, which is going to be hugely important because they got to speed things along. There's a lot of deporting to be done, and that court, quote unquote, needs to be moving fast.
What kind of infrastructure are they going to need, even beyond the judges? I mean, local prisons aren't going to hold people, or local jails. Are they going to have to use buses, or just put people straight onto airplanes once they're arrested? Is there any talk of that you've been privy to?
So they're going to have to do everything all at once. It's going to be a massive muscle movement. This needs to be treated like the moon launch program. It needs to be a whole of government, massive surge of investments. And to answer your question, I'm going to tell you why I think the Laken Riley Act is a completely insufficient step and not meeting the moment of the mandate President Trump was elected on. President Trump was elected on the mandate of mass deportations. Not any caveat of, there's certain classes that are, the most deportable. Everyone. Mass deportations. He brought in the history of the Eisenhower era program, which we can't say the name on this polite TV show, but it's a spicy one, okay? They were doing about 1 million a year back then when the illegal population was much smaller than it is now. So Trump needs to get to about 4 million deportations a year to meet the mandate, okay? And when you have the Laken Riley bill, which basically says criminal aliens are the ones we're going after, what you're really saying is the other 95% of people who don't get arrested are not a priority. And so they need to open the aperture much wider. And in fact, it's almost perverse. Criminal aliens, of course, they're awful. They should, we don't want them here. But you shouldn't wait for an illegal alien to kill, rape, murder, steal, assault a cop, whatever, until they're deported. I want to prevent those crimes, not wait for them to become murderers, for them to become a priority. And so what Congress should be doing is getting this moon launch style program, a massive surge of resources. Homan's on TV saying, he wants 100,000 beds. I want Homan to have 500,000 beds. Okay, you need to be seamlessly working with the states. You need to be working with the nonprofit sector. I call this idea homeward bound. Okay, deportation doesn't need to be ugly. We need to work with these nonprofits. We've given hundreds of millions of dollars to them. Help them get people out of the country. I don't care if it's, giving them a ticket, getting them job services. See you later. We need to turn off the public schools' ability to take them in. Challenge Playa Veto. We need Texas to step up. Trump just gave them the authority under executive order to fight back the invasion. Everybody has a role to play. It's a massive, massive coordinated muscle movement. Laken Riley is just a small head nod at it.
It seems like that was something something that you would do when there's a Democrat president. You see how many Democrats you can force to vote against it, and then you use that to run against them. But they kept on going after the confirmation of the president, after the oath of office, and then they ended up passing a bill that was kind of a troll in some ways, an important one. It's important to get rid of rapists and murderers, but it's important more than that. Just like you said, get rid of a lot more people than just that.
Right, absolutely. A couple of things. One, the criminal justice system, even as messed up as it is in urban areas, still takes murder and rape pretty seriously, right? And so if someone kills somebody, illegal or not, they're likely going to go to jail. And so it's not even, they're already taken care of, for a lack of a better word. The fact that the elected class in Washington, D.C. is only comfortable with going after criminals shows that they're deathly afraid of actually implementing mass deportations on scale. If they were serious, the first thing they would have done, not yesterday, but already, they would have been putting out the budget required to implement all of these things, and the authorities required. They're running from this, and it's going to be a huge problem for the Trump administration, who's fully committed to this, if Congress does not catch up with them.
Did you personally come up with the phrase "homeward bound"?
You know, there was a movie. I've heard about it, but Homeward Bound is a
Fantastic.
I've heard of the movie too. Everyone loves it.
We love the classic movies.
It's
It's
a
right in our
book.
genre.
I read the book, but you coined that.
You read the book?
You're talking. Yes, there's a book.
Based on a book?
It's based on books.
Which
I
is
used to
better.
read- I used to be smart and read things. Oof. That was a long time ago. But Homeward Bound is genius. That is an incredible recasting of what this needs to be. And I think it goes to a very deep point that is going to have to be part of the narrative arc of the next few years, which is that we really are sending people home. A lot of people have to go back to their homes. And that story is going to have to be told in a way that I think is more truthful than what the left is going to be saying over and over again. And we know what that is, right? I mean, what you point to is a very important battle over public rhetoric that I don't think a lot of people on the right, I think they, it won't be a surprise when it happens, but I don't think they've really factored in yet, right? Our side is a little too happy right now. And when we have 24 hours of, the best case scenarios of people you feel bad for having to go home, it's going to be bad.
Right? That's absolutely right. That's why they're playing to the lowest common denominator now. And unless someone calls it out, they'll stay there.
Can you just say something before you go on as well? We need to just look in the camera and tell our audience. I mean, who are you and what do you do? Because we bring on oversight every so often, but it's pretty interesting work that you've been up.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cameras. I'm Mike Howell. I run the Heritage Oversight Project, which is a lot of words for basically a team of former federal law enforcement agents, investigators, people who worked in places that took care of big problems, and a team of lawyers. And basically what we started was an acknowledgement that Congress and the other oversight mechanisms and the public were wholly insufficient. I'm a huge long-term critic of congressional oversight, and it's just basically become a messaging function where they announce process, they send letters, blah, blah, blah. So what we did is we launched our own investigative unit and coupled that with a mass litigation at scale. Almost 100 lawsuits against Biden based off of 100,000 Freedom of Information Act requests. So it's a scale that far surpasses what anyone's been able to do. And the work speaks for itself. We uncovered the Mayorkas, when they accused them of the Border Patrol agents of whipping the illegals down the border. They even framed the horse. We outed that as being a complete hoax. We had undercovers throughout the country embedded in Mexican and nonprofits and American nonprofits, basically showing how illegals get into the country and they get their fake papers. A lot of them were telling us they were registered to vote and registered by other nonprofits. New York Times, NBC, NPR all came after us for that kind of stuff. We've just kept pounding on all the scandals of the day, actually doing what we think the congressional function should have done, getting documents, not announcing process, announcing findings. And so we're just a finding, announcing machine. The world's our oyster now with Trump in, because all these major problems can be solved now. And we have the record sets and know how to do it. And then we're moving into the states. You got the resistance governors. The resistance is a joke right now, but to the extent there is one, Newsom, Pritzker, Wes Moore, mark my words, will be the Democrat presidential nominee in 2028. We're going to go after all those guys and just replicate what we did at the Fed level to the state level.
Well, Mike, you're clearly good at research, but I think you're also very good at messaging, something the Republicans usually suck at, if we're being quite honest. They usually can't get this right. I wish they would, listen to what you guys are saying over here. But back in 2023, the Oversight Project went through and had the 51 former intelligent officials, right? But you went out there and said that they were interfering in the 2020 election. And now Trump has actually gone through and revoked the security clearance for them. So just kind of taking them through the different steps. When you guys get something, when you get the documents through, when you get the actual outcome, Take us through that.
Yeah, so the 51 intel agencies agents that signed that Hunter Biden letter saying, "Oh, it's Russian disinformation." The last Congress came in saying they were going to do something about it, and this is just another pattern of it not happening. The only politician in my adult life who's kept their promise is President Trump. So day one, he issues this executive order taking away all of their clearances. What we did is we want to take it a step further. It's not just about these individuals. Of course, they did awful things. They interfered with the democratic process, but it's the organizations that support them. You know, these people all are paid by other people that have government contracts or they get grants. And it's this ecosystem that we need to absolutely destroy, not just the individual kind of people that, you know, poke their head up and say, "Hey, I'm signing this letter." It's the guy paying them. It's the agencies that have contracts with the entity. And so my advice is take it a step further. Don't just rip their clearances. Make sure the government doesn't work with any of those people.
On anything ever again. Another thing on messaging. So this right now, the American people are polling very highly in favor of deportation, especially if anyone has been convicted of any other crime while they're here. But we know the American people, and that will change. I mean, law enforcement agents are used to seeing ugly things. If we talked about this last night. If I stole a vehicle, the police would understand when they came to my house, arrested me, and took me away. My son would cry. My wife would cry. It would be an emotional thing, but they're trained to deal with that for public safety. The American people aren't. We absolutely collapsed over one picture of Elian Gonzalez, which was obviously a bad policy and a scared kid. But you're going to see a lot of scared kids on camera. You're going to see women crying on TV, and the American appetite for deportations you might see decrease when they actually see what that starts to look like. But at the same time, there are all these other different stories that aren't being told about visually about the child trafficking, the sex abuse, the crime, the gangs. How can Republicans, how can conservative media, how can supporters of the president kind of stay ahead of that messaging and keep the eye on the American people's resolve steady?
Right. A couple things. First, Elian Gonzalez is glad he was deported. He's back in Cuba now as a politician, and he loves being this, you know, I'm back in Cuba where I should be. And so he is a success story of deportation. And so I think it takes that kind of attitude. The mandates for mass deportation, we need to keep that. Mass deportation means millions and millions, the most ever, the highest ever. And so the political messaging needs to be on that, not these little half-step measures that we're seeing on Capitol Hill. Obviously, the media is going to go crazy. They're going to have all these crying people and things like that. But we need to kind of reframe how this is going to work. It's not just handcuffs on people and throwing everyone on planes, although, you know, to the extent that's humanly possible, that needs to be scaled up. It's about turning off all of the reasons why illegal aliens want to come here and are able to stay here, whether it's worksite enforcement, you know, it's going after the employers, whether it's the schools, not letting our schools be treated as daycare for illegals, whether it's the healthcare system. Take off all of these pull factors, and people start to not want to be here anymore and leaving on their own. Also, with this Homeward Bound initiative, if we got everyone behind it, there's a lot of ways to encourage people to leave to help it and making more, you know, seamless. It's going to be the biggest foreign aid gift in human history once we send tens of million people back to their home economies instead of having this parasitic relationship with the United States where we take an entire working age class, import it here for them just to send their money back. We're going to invest in those countries by sending them their people back. Everyone's going to be happy. The mandate's going to be met. The libs are going to go crazy, but we just got to have a
I think they're playing cute with it, too. The Indian government said that they'd be willing to work with the U.S. government to deport 18,000 illegal Indian immigrants. And I'm thinking, in Northern Virginia? Because it can't be 18,000. There's no way.
Right.
I think everyone's just playing a little cute with the facts here.
A lot of cutesies going around.
So much cuties going on in D.C. right now. The streets look better. Everybody's happy. The vibes are good. Mike Howell, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll explain when we come back why the censorship industrial complex had a pretty hard day yesterday. Don't go anywhere. Well, all weekend here in D.C., it's been taken over by celebrations, MAGA hats everywhere in the streets. And you know what? It's a good feeling right now. Gabe Kaminsky, he is an investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner. He recently wrote about this. And you know what? I love this because it feels like the old meme right now, like, I'm the captain now, right? Are the conservatives actually going to be taking over everything? Or is this just the little bubble in D.C. right now?
Well, yeah. So I popped around a little bit yesterday to some of the, inauguration parties, one of which at actually the Conservative Partnership Institute. But earlier in the day, I went over to a bar that former Breitbart editor Raheem Kassam is investor in, and just kind of talked to folks and was able to kind of be there on the scene as this group, American Moment, a group that launched a few years ago of guys not much older than me in their 20s who are aiming with the goal of staffing a future administration. And this was kind of a big moment for them, culmination moment, because their emeritus now, CEO Saurabh Sharma is now at the PPO in the White House helping to staff, and they have a new CEO. So quite a lot of excitement yesterday in D.C., particularly for a lot of these conservative nonprofit groups that have been waiting for this moment, and this is a huge moment for them.
And it seems so different. I mean, this time 8 years ago, Sean Spicy was fighting with the press about how many people are at the inauguration. This time, you don't see any of that. There's none of it. The streets outside, even though it's like 18 degrees, are populated by seems like the entire wizard population that voted for Trump is here. Men with long beards and MAGA hats walking around, just exploring Washington, D.C. I think it's a different feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Now, Gabe, you had asked for a comment from me about American Moment. I can still do that, but since we're here, let's just talk about it. The one story that Sharma likes to tell about American Moment, and I'm fond of him telling, this is a good one, is that he was reading J.D. Vance's article on globalization, and I think it was called End the Globalization Gravy Train in American Mind that we had published, and he subsequently went on, I think one of his early Tucker appearances based on that article, and that article went out to a young Saurabh Sharma, and he read it and was up all night thinking about it, and in part that led to him thinking, like, what will I do? I'll start this nonprofit. And it is interesting because it's at least an instructive example of the kind of thing that is possible still in America, where now he is, in the White House helping with personnel when the entire struggle, right, of the first Trump administration for the first 2-3 years was how can we not get sniped in the back by that same office if we're part of the MAGA agenda? I think it is a testament to what's possible and what happened.
Well, I think it's particularly interesting with groups like American Moment, Center for Renewing America, CPI. There's essentially a whole crop up of these conservative nonprofits that developed in the last, under 10 years that now have, I think, a larger seat at the table and are more influenced than in prior generations. There was kind of the same larger groups that I think controlled a lot of the narrative. In the case of Center for Renewing America, their founder, Russell Vogt, is now, Trump's pick for Office of Management and Budget. They have fellows such as Mark Paoletta, who's was tapped for general counsel at the White House Budget Office. So these kinds of groups, I think, are going to be really influential in helping to shape policy at a minimum.
Over the last 8 years, really, you've seen a lot of left-wing groups who've been working hand in glove with the Department of State under Joe Biden or with international organizations or with NewsGuard to censor journalists, to try and put us down. And you've done a lot of reporting on this. So where does that relationship and that power structure stand in a Trump administration world where also you see Facebook starting to walk back and end its own fact-check program?
I'm trying to understand what that's going to look like under Trump, truly, and we're going to see. But notably yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order aiming to, I think in the language was something along the lines of outlawing federally funded censorship, which sounds really nice. Certainly, I think
it's supposed to be unconstitutional. Anyway.
Right? It's supposed to be. Shouldn't
you would think that is what the First Amendment actually exists to do, but
you would think maybe, perhaps many are saying, but we'll have to see what that actually looks like. And the reason is that I think that it's going to come down to nuts and bolts is that at the State Department's Global Engagement Center, the agency that we had reported at the Examiner has been active in funding groups aiming to suppress speech domestically. The Global Engagement Center shut down in December, technically. So
they never really go away, though.
Technically
right?
Shut down because they lost spending. However, they didn't really shut down because they actually just moved all their funding and many of their staffers to a new agency called it's called a hub, aiming to counter alleged foreign disinformation. They took, I think, $30 million in taxpayer resources from that agency, and they're still existing. And several of the career officials who worked at GEC are now at this new agency. So I definitely would expect some of these Republican senators to be looking into that.
How aware are the people going in to that department. I mean, we have Marco Rubio. We have many people we know
Yeah.
who are going into state. And how aware are they of this issue, and ready do you think they are to take action?
Rubio, at a minimum, should be aware of it. I believe I've quoted Rubio on the Global Engagement Center in the past in reporting, and some of, I believe, staffers in Rubio's office. I know that there's at least one lawmaker who is planning to, in written questioning soon, to some future State Department appointees to directly ask them about this, to say, are you planning to look at the Global Engagement Center and what's become of it, and how will you look at this issue moving forward? So I would presume that, I mean, a lot of the people who are now going into the Trump administration are some of the same people who were the loudest critics of this. So one can only assume, but I think
I'd
conservatives,
like to see the White House smash it. It's their puppy.
they have the
They should
ability.
take care of it.
Yeah. So
It's my dog, Dad.
So yeah, and so what would that look like to smash it? I mean, let's get. I want to know. I want to see it happen.
You can't just turn the lights on and let the cockroaches run away. You
Yes.
have to round up the cockroaches and say, go outside. Let them free in the woods.
Right. So walk us through that. I mean, in order to really get rid of this,
Yeah.
they're going to cycle people around. You can't really fire anyone. What do you do to root this out?
honestly, I think it's a really complicated question. And in the last spending bill fight in December,
Just real quick.
Yes.
That is crazy. I mean, isn't it crazy that it is a complicated question?
yeah,
I mean, because it shouldn't be, right? It should be you're fired.
Right.
But we know that it's not, because it's not. I'm not.
That sounds like a
critical of
Putin
you.
talking point.
Yeah, because it's a complicated structure, right? And it's hard, complicated rules to move around anyway. Go ahead.
yeah, no, it's very complicated. And in the last spending bill fight, Mike Johnson initially brokered a deal with Democrats that conservatives were highly critical of, that aimed to give the Global Engagement Center a 1-year extension and lifeline in exchange for some, I forget the provisions that they said they made that deal. Conservatives were very frustrated about that. Mike Johnson's opinion, however, was that by doing that, by extending it initially, they would then be in a position in the next spending bill fight to know where everyone is and know where all the funding is to, I guess, target it. I don't know if
So that's the problem, is that the money's appropriated by Congress.
the money's appropriated by Congress.
That's the only thing that
Yeah.
they don't do oversight anymore. They just do appropriation, and they hate it when you touch their appropriations.
Yeah.
Hate it.
Yeah, so on one hand, I don't know if Johnson's correct about that. I will say, though, that he was correct that because it's not, they weren't, now the agency is very decentralized. I mean, they've moved staffers and funding to this new hub. They've also moved it to like 10 to 15 different bureaus, the African Bureau, East Asian Bureau. So it could be difficult. Perhaps, I mean, if this administration wants to look at these staffers, they could compile lists of people that they
Read some of
think
your
were involved in
reporting.
this and try to get rid of them. That might be one idea, but
We should get an excellent investigative journalist at the Washington Examiner on the case.
to
Do
look
you know
at
anyone? Do you know anyone
Make
that
the
can do
list.
that, Gabe?
Well, I'll tell you what, we reported that some of the officials involved in the Global Engagement Center have already recirculated, at least under Biden. Some of these are career officials, but they immediately, when GEC lost funding, started to advise Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and the Deputy Secretary of State and other top officials. So they've already, the migration has happened, so it could be difficult to track.
Well, Gabe, keep shining a light on it and let us know how this whole thing continues to play out. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll look at the cultural implications of the Trump inauguration and break down everything that the guys did last night. Definitely not me. Don't go anywhere. Well, recently, we've seen MAGA taking over the NFL. They've been doing all of the touchdown dances. They've been in music. We see Carrie Underwood and Snoop Dogg, and the list goes on here performing in D.C. over the inauguration. And now it just begs the question, you guys, is MAGA actually taking over the culture? Can this actually happen where it's going to grasp on and not let go in just this little moment?
The sneakers, the slippers, the costumes I've seen. I mean, heck, wasn't Mike Tyson hanging out with you last night and that YouTuber who beat him up?
Yeah, the Paul brothers, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield. If you were a boxer last night, you were at the ball that I was hanging out at.
See, this is all over. I mean, it's all over. I think it is. The trend has already begun, and you could see it in the pictures of everybody still coming in the last few days. Chris mentioned yesterday about Melania's dress.
No, it
I
was
think
wonderful.
What you said was very good. You should repeat it here. But there, when you look around, what you see is beauty, color, and a sort of brightness that comes from something that's a lot more than the tired old stuff that we're used to. Because
Except
it's
there's
not
no
tired
brightness.
and it's not old.
No brightness in Melania. We said her dress, her outfit said, "I'm here to settle all family business. Today is the day." And they got right to it as well. They got right to it, and nothing could dampen it. I mean, 8 years ago, if Donald Trump he did one executive order on his first day 8 years ago. In his first day, he did 200 executive orders. He did one of the largest I can think of mass clemencies and pardons and commutations of any president. And there was no outrage. It was, and you know what's funny is Brian Stelter, that a ball of human who was resurrected by CNN recently, discontinued the way he always was apoplectic this morning. And I'm writing about this for the Beltway Brief, so we can get more into it tomorrow. But he was saying, if you watched Fox News, you saw happiness and glitter and glamour and a golden age and champagne and Mike Tyson. But we were talking about the rule of law. So shut up, Brian.
Nerd.
It reminded me of that time that Brian Stelter, literally, he wrote this in his book about the time he bumped into Sean Hannity at a bar party in New York. And he's like, I went up to Sean and I said, do you ever feel bad about calling me Potato Head, making fun of me? And Sean looked at me and he said, no. And then he walked to the bar and had a drink. I'm like, I can't believe you told that story in public. That's hysterical. It makes Sean Hannity look awesome.
Yes. It's like the coolest thing I've heard
No,
Sean Hannity
no.
ever do.
He said he put his hands on his shoulders and said, no.
All right, so it was cool having the boxers at the ball last night. We also had basically everybody that is going to be in Trump's cabinet at my ball. Now, yours was
Your ball, not his ball.
a little different, Matthew. I want to know, you have to tell the people.
What was it like in the overflow room?
At the
Well, as
Liberty
opposed
ball.
to, I was fairly close to the stage, as opposed to your fancy pants balls with the people listening to Jason Aldean sing "Try That in a Small Town" and talk about how much Trump loves that song, which was a great moment. And I sort of wandered around the whole thing, observing. You have people from all over the country. I mean, Liberty last night was more, of the people.
Yes.
And it was a glorious,
tuxedoed people.
glorious time. I mean, everyone got the village people.
That's-
Speaking of people, and of course,
That's the highlight.
Trump and everyone
Let's
else.
be real. You
So
put that on the socials, too. It's all over.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of wake up in the morning and piece together your night and think, did that really just happen? Did I see the village people and Trump turning around doing the dance? And it's all true, right? It's all true.
What's your favorite performance you caught, though? Was it the village people at the Liberty Ball, or was it Snoop Dogg at the Log Cabin Republicans Party?
I missed
was
that.
your favorite?
I missed that one. Were you there?
No.
I don't know.
I wasn't invited.
I think what you see wandering around was incredible, because you just saw a cross section of the entire coalition. People here clearly from all over the country, in the middle of the freezing cold. Some of us almost got frostbite last night, I believe, but I was close. But it was so many people from all over the country, so many different acts, and it was more than just one tired old thing. And that's what I'll take away. It really was a celebration for the country.
And I used to get a lot of heck, I tell you, I was a punk rocker for a long time, and I don't understand the direction a lot of punk rockers went, which is like they love the man. They're out there with their rainbow pins
You're
on.
not even a Gen Xer.
I'm
This is a very Gen
I'm learning a
X-based
lot right
take.
now.
I had
Go on.
I had
Yes.
chaos spikes and everything, and I was a bad kid. My poor parents. But all my friends were supportive of liberalism through that. And like, how could you support this? What are you talking about? Trump is the most punk rock president who's ever existed. Donald Trump, and he also, until now, didn't have the corporations on his side, didn't have the world global organizations on his side. He was actually fighting the man. That seems to be where you ought to be. And I'm seeing more and more people come around to that point of view. And it's spreading. The counterculture is conservative.
People are coming around to it. Corporations are coming around to it because it is the Trump mandate.
Yes.
You want to be rebellious? Go to church. Like,
Right.
it's crazy. It's a whole
Right.
new world.
No, exactly. And that is, it's growing. It has momentum. So one thing I'll say is what you can see visually in the faces that you see on TV, faces you see walking around here, is how large that coalition is. And I don't think that people should get depressed because of it. No blackpilling, right? So what I mean by that is you get
Not
people
today.
you get people saying like, oh, well, Zuckerberg was never on our side, and all these tech guys are going to ruin the coalition. And all these people are going to come in, and they're sort of purity spiraling. Whereas I'm looking at it like, this is what winning looks like.
This was our thing.
Everyone's going to come and kiss the ring. Of course they are. Why? Because we're winning and we're winners, and this is what we do. We'll negotiate out those parts of the coalition. But who really was dissenting? Who really had skin in the game the last 4 years? Who really stood up and was brave against the sort of tyranny that everyone felt and knows in their own places of work, right, throughout the country? Well, those people are the people being rewarded now. And it's great that everyone is breaking and coming towards that movement because that just enables a real mandate to go forward and be implemented.
And I'm happy too, because I finally found, you see people still wearing masks outside. And generally it's kind of funny. I love seeing someone jogging in a hot day in D.C. with a mask on. I'm like, you go, Bal. But I never want to yell at them because, what if it's like, hey, actually, my wife is really sick and has a bad immune system, or I'm going to see my child tonight who's in the hospital.
Right.
So, but I've come up with something you can do. It never gets you in trouble. You say to them at the end of their action, I hope you feel better. I hope you get well
there you
soon.
go.
And then they either look at you and say, I'm not sick, and then you just laugh at them, or they say, thank you, and feel stupid.
That's one way of dealing with it.
These are tips
little
you
ways
can
to cope.
use. See, we come to D.C. and Bedford starts giving us these useful information that we can use to belittle people rightly.
Yes.
Well,
you
give
have
us
to.
It's good.
Give us some information, some useful tips for taking on the administrative state.
Wow. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
First of all,
You got a minute?
You
Come on.
got to get rid of this idea that these are brave public servants. They're parasites and they've done wrong. It's no longer just a guess. You have to go at them exactly that way, and you have to be merciless, and you have to not have any tears about people, losing their jobs.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think that's yeah. Let's go. The political will is one of the most important things people don't talk about in politics. There's city council races the same way. If you have someone who wants to run for office, who cares? A lot of people want to run for office. It's like saying, I want to be an actor or an actress. You're a barista. That's nice. Do you have the political will to do what's necessary? That's what's
mandate?
important. Yes,
The mandate.
And so you could have the mandate and squander it, right?
Yeah.
You have to want to go do the thing. You have to want to go do the right thing. That's what has to motivate you to get that thing done. And if you don't have someone, who has that political will to do the thing and get the things done, then you're losing.
Yeah, the moment is definitely right now to take on the administrative state and to just go through and reform the federal government in a meaningful way. And we see that in the culture, and we see that also going through all of the bills and everything else that's happening. So that's going to be it for us here on Blaze News tonight. We'll catch you back here tomorrow.